Hello, I'm Trudi Rainsberry and this is the fourth in a series of videos aimed at offering practical ideas and strategies for supporting children and young people on the autism spectrum, whether you're a parent, carer or educational practitioner. So far we've considered watching for why, writing it down and talking it through in order for us to have a proactive approach. We've also thought about how we might better communicate and connect with our children through being interested, being engaging and being creative. Last week we considered ways in which we might support our children to understand the context and meaning of different situations and scenarios, making the implicit explicit, and doing this through communication, explanation and repetition with strategies that might have been role play, rehearsal, sensory experiences, signing, symbol storyboards, social stories and social scripts. Explaining the where, when, who, what, why and how of different situations. This week we continue to consider ways to support our children and young people on the autism spectrum to develop their understanding of context and meaning. Doing this through exploring and unpicking social situations to share their own perspective and perspective of what others might be thinking and feeling. And we're going to do this through looking at resources that involve drawing and comic strip style conversations in order for us to continue to consider ways in which we might make the implicit explicit. Creativity through art and drawing can be a really powerful way of children and young people to explore and express their thoughts and feelings, and it's something that we will return to when considering emotional regulation. I want to just show an example of how a picture can express so much more than words, particularly when this young person created the picture for their annual review meeting. They had become a school refuser and no longer wanted to attend that school, and they really wanted to express exactly what they felt in that situation but were unable to do it in words. Drawing, writing or talking through comic strips, cartoons and storyboards can be very beneficial for sharing what others might be thinking and feeling in different situations. Thinking about thinking or metacognition can benefit all children. And for children on the autism spectrum, it's particularly important that we make it meaningful for them, working with them collaboratively. Simple cartoons, comic strips and drawn characters can be a way to reflect on events, working through scenarios and exploring different thoughts and feelings, using thought and speech bubbles where a child is able to draw, write or talk about their perspective of people's thoughts and feelings, and where an adult is able to support them by sensitively sharing their own perspective in a clear and positive way. In creating a comic strip or storyboard, it enables a child to consider what they thought and did in a particular situation and what they might think and do on another similar situation, supporting our children to generalise and to discuss the different outcomes that could occur with an adult sensitively supporting them. And I sometimes use this template. It's a very simple 3-stage comic strip with the first, next and then of the situation, and the first take one would be the adult supporting the child to express exactly what they believed others and themselves they were thinking and feeling in that particular situation, with the take two being sensitively supported by an adult to maybe share if they believed another person might be thinking something that was particularly negative, and you're able to unpick that social situation with the child, remembering at all times that we are not telling the child what they must be thinking and feeling. We're working sensitively and collaboratively with them. The framework for comic strip conversations was developed by Carol Gray in the 1990s at the same sort of time as social stories were being developed. And she provided this template for conversations and turn taking with children and young people on the autism spectrum through a shared use of symbols and structure. And so how might you create a cartoon or comic strip conversation with the child or young person that you are supporting? You could consider the following steps. Firstly, how are you going to draw? And that could seem like a bit of an odd question, because you may be thinking, well, pencil and paper would be best because then you can rub out any mistakes, and that would be very valid. However, you need to consider the style in which our child or young person prefers to draw or communicate. And children I've worked with have preferred to use a whiteboard and pen in some instances, which is less permanent, but you can take a photocopy or an image on an iPad or at home on a phone so that you have got a permanent copy to reflect on. Also, some children engage better when their particular interest is used, such as a pen or colour that they prefer. And with older young people, I've experienced them wanting to use their own art materials and to use a tablet to draw on. So you need to think about how the different styles can be adapted, and it may be that you work collaboratively and the young person does the drawing if they're particularly interested in manga or graphic novels. So you do your talking and writing any thoughts and feelings. However, they are able to engage in an activity that they really like and value. Next, try it out. Try it out with working with a partner or a friend or a colleague or other children to feel really positively about engaging in a drawn, talking and writing conversation, so that you feel confident when using it with the person that you are supporting. Next, choose a scenario or a time or a topic that you feel is a really positive one to share and work through with the child and young person on the first instance. So at home, it may have been a trip to the park, or in an educational setting, it might have been engaging really well in a particular activity, so that you are able to reflect positively on each other's thoughts and feelings in that particular situation. Because as much as it's a valuable tool to unpick social misconceptions and confusion, it is also a very valuable resource to share feelings and emotions and thoughts in a very calm and relaxed way. So moving on to the environment, thinking about feeling comfortable, and the child or young person that you're going to be working alongside, so you'll probably be sitting alongside them, maybe think carefully about the proximity or position that you sit in, because you both need to feel really well regulated, and considering the sensory needs of the child or young person, and also whether you feel well regulated in that particular environment. So making sure it's not a particularly busy space either. Next, initially you will need to guide or model the conversation that you are drawing. And it may be with older young people, they already have an understanding of the way this collaboration is going to work. But certainly with younger people or children who may have less verbal understanding, it might be that you need to model and share quite often initially. And next, you need to summarise the thoughts and feelings that have been shared in that conversation, and do this really sensitively, ensuring that you have understood and listened to the child's understanding and thoughts on a particular situation. And finally, the solution. When you're working towards a solution, make sure this is a collaboration, and make sure you're trying to share what your understanding is of others' thoughts and feelings without appearing to impose your views on the child or young person. And finally, Carol Gray suggests that colours could be used to share different emotional states, and that may be something that you want to explore more fully, and I will share a link to Carol Gray's website at the bottom in the description. However, obviously some children and young people on the autism spectrum might have their own palette of colours that link to different emotions, so we do need to be sensitive of that. Here is an example that is taken from the page explaining about comic strip style conversations. It's got 8 of the symbols that Carol Gray suggests being used, with obviously talking and thought bubbles being very similar to ones we would normally use. But I particularly like interruptions and the use of capital letters for loud talking and small letters for quiet talking, and also putting on ears for listening. And this is where you can see that a simple stick people are considered to be absolutely acceptable for these styles of comic strip styles of conversation. However, obviously some children may have a particular interest in drawing, and we need to be sensitive to that. And here you can see a modelled example where I have written what the carer is saying and the child might be saying, and obviously on your comic strip you wouldn't have to write what was being said necessarily, but you can see how this is a child who's misunderstood, feeling that they've been shouted at when in actual fact they were sat quietly, although you can see the teachers saying blah blah blah. But this is a genuine situation that occurs quite often in the classroom environment for some children and young people on the autism spectrum. So I hope that has helped with some ideas about creating your own comic strip style cartoons and conversations and adapting it to meet the needs of your young person. Drawing and comic strip style conversations are one way of children and young people exploring and unpicking social situations that they find particularly confusing, to develop an understanding of the context and meaning in different scenarios. However, it's not the only way, and special interest can be a really powerful tool. For some young people, it may be through the use of drama and media, filming and recording and role-playing and reenacting particular situations, or through modelling with cartoon and television characters that children have a particular interest with. One of my children used to like doing that with Doctor Who characters, and also thinking about toys and objects that they find particularly interesting that can be used to reenact and role play. And I have used Playmobil as an example, and these 3 characters were used when I was working with a parent and child, and you can see which one's me, the one with the grey hair. And this was a really positive way of everybody being able to share and express their thoughts and feelings, and to model and guide what others might be thinking and feeling for that child in that situation. As well as in the school setting, where I've actually used Lego with a class of Year 4 children, and it wasn't these exact characters but very similar, and we had the topic of Robin Hood and the history topic of the Plantagenets and the Crusades. And so the young people in my class were able to role play and talk about the thoughts and feelings of the different Lego characters in terms of those different contexts, to develop their understanding of that meaning. Next week, I will be working through some ideas and strategies for supporting our children with transition and change, which I know is a key area for children and young people on the autism spectrum. Working through short-term transitions and shifting attention to much bigger transitions, such as returning to school following the COVID-19 crisis, as well as moving educational settings, key stages and classes. I hope that you found today to be useful for you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.